Whitewood Historical Museum is super excited to start a podcast. The summer staff of 2020
Our town. Just go with it.
Cool.
Leave this all in.
Got it. Alrighty. This is going so great. So Brooklyn, why don't you tell us a little bit of how we chose the name Our Town?
Okay, so me and Catherine were looking through the good old history of our museum, and we came across a CD. I know, how high-tech. And we were looking at it, and we started playing it, and the very first song that we listened to was called Our Town. And it inspired us so much, and so when we were thinking about this podcast, the only option was Our Town.
Fun fact, Our Town was composed by people in the Whitewood area. So that's also kind of cool. That's kind of what inspired us a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope you like the spoons if you listen to it. Maybe we'll play that for you in a future podcast.
Maybe, yeah.
If we get, how many views do we say?
300.
300 views, we will play you the glorious Our Town song that inspired this podcast.
I can't.
And Tay hasn't heard it yet, so
No,
I think it will be an experience.
It is an experience. That is
I have been told that by both of you, like 3 times each.
probably, yeah.
I shouldn't say that. No, I'm not going to say that. Welcome to our podcast.
It'll be great. Let's jump in. I think today we're gonna talk a little bit about what is a museum and why they're important. So yeah, let's just jump in. What is a museum to you guys?
Do we want to start with the pure definitions of museum, or do we
Sure.
want to start with what it's to us personally? Okay, well, to me, museums are purely the dedication to preserving and interpreting of evidence, essentially, and so it's the physical raw materials from different points in time, and without the museums, that probably really wouldn't be a thing. So that's kind of what museums are to me. But what about you guys?
Yeah, what do you think, Tay?
I find them a really educational atmosphere. I enjoy checking out all the random artifacts and cool stuff, and think more people should check them out because they're really cool and got a lot of history preserved, which wouldn't be otherwise.
Yeah.
I went a little bit more literal with a definition. I'm just going to read what the International Council of Museums set the definition of what a museum is as of 2022. And that is, a museum is a non-for-profit permanent institution in the service of society that researchers collects, conserves, interprets, exhibits tangible and intangible heritage. It's open to the public, accessible and inclusive. Museums foster diversity and sustainability. They operate and communicate ethically, professionally, and with the participation of communities offering varied experiences for education, enjoyment, reflection, and knowledge sharing. That is a long definition.
I love that I had that exact thing on my notes as well, so we had the same brain thought.
Mine's much shorter.
What did you get?
Oh, a building where objects of historical, scientific, artistic, and cultural interest are stored and exhibited.
Yeah,
Love
I think
that.
they're all valid. Oh my goodness, did you highlight the same things I highlighted?
Probably. It's that teacher energy.
Exact same words.
You guys can't see our papers, but right now we both have tangible, intangible, and varied experiences highlighted.
I'm telling you, it's that teacher energy. We know how to highlight the important things.
So what about the tangible and intangible? What made you want to highlight those?
It's just when I'm, as a teacher, I'm just when kids are learning, a physical hands-on thing, a tangible thing.
Yeah.
Makes you learn. But then there's, the intangible of, the, history books and, online information and just, stories passed on from history. It's just sinks in when there's an actual physical story, when grandparents or teachers are passing you on a story from history, you hear it, but then when you actually physically see it, it just gives it more meaning to me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, and I think it works the other way because you talked about the intangible having more value with the tangible.
Yeah.
I think the tangible also has more value with the intangible. Look at the bricks that we have. Those mean nothing without the story.
Do they want to know the story about the bricks that I had?
Go ahead.
So, in our museum, you should come visit it, by the way. Super awesome, and you can meet us, and we're super cool as well. There's some bricks in our museum, and when I first came to the museum, one of the gentlemen that work here, they were showing me this brick, and they said, can you find the frog in this brick? And when I tell you, I stared at this brick for probably 30 minutes, okay? And I'm like, I don't see a frog. And he's like, Brooklyn, this is frog brick. There's no frog in it. And I was traumatized for the rest of my life when I tell you that. But now, whenever someone comes in, I tell them that same thing, and they laugh, so.
And what makes it a frog brick is the indent in the brick is called a frog.
Yeah. Just teaching things, I didn't know that. So, anyway, that's my trauma out on the internet forever and ever.
Oh.
All right. Do we want to talk about what kind of we think museums provide for, like, the public and, like, personal? And...
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Do you want to start, or should
Nope.
I? Oh, God. All right. So, personally, like, I think museums form a sense of well-being. Like, when I look at history, whether it's in a book or a museum, it reminds me kind of, like, where we started. And I find it interesting to look back on, like, society and, like, how much it's formed since then. Like, when I look back, like, particularly in our museum, and I see all the photos, and I'm like, like, the world has changed so much. And I see the different devices, like the sewing machine, which we'll get into that, and, like, how much things have changed. It's, like, really kind of cool to look back. And, like, especially on the topic that you said, like, sustainability and diversity, like, in times now in the world where there's so much inclusivity, to look back at times where there wasn't, it's just kind of cool to see, like, how much we've grown as a society, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy going to the sewing machines.
Yeah.
There's a video on our YouTube channel. Definitely check that out if you haven't already. And I'll go off on that YouTube video too about sewing machines. But when I started researching it, right, because I was aiming to do these YouTube videos, and it was National Sewing Machine Day. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm researching sewing machines. How boring is that? But then as I was getting into it, like, did you know there was a sewing machine war?
No, I did not.
No.
You'll have to check out the YouTube video to learn more about it. But it's, like, so crazy, the history of sewing machines, and how in the Industrial Revolution, we often think of, like, the big things, like the trains, right? And how that has affected transportation. But we forget about those little household tools that were invented during that time that really made life a lot easier. Like,
I don't know about easier. When my grandma taught me how to sew, and I was looking at that thing like it was a dinosaur.
I gotta be the first. I'll be the first to admit I can't sew. But I mean, if you think about it, because they made the sewing machines, they were able to mass produce clothes, and that's why we don't have to sew our clothes today. We just go into the store. Yeah. Probably a good thing we
No one put me in, like, if I ever have a child, knock on wood, do not let me make their clothes. It'll have 7 arms, holes in all the places. Yeah.
7 arms.
Yeah. Oh, have you met me? I can't even make mac and cheese properly, let alone sew a dress or something.
What does mac and cheese have to do with sewing?
I don't know. I'm just letting you know how incapable I am.
Oh my goodness. Any thoughts about this, Tadine?
Sewing your own clothes with 7 arms. I don't know how you can do that.
Okay, let's move on. It was a bad example.
But yeah, I think museums are a great place for, like, reflection.
Yeah.
And coming and really just reflecting on that past, present, and future.
Yeah.
And how we can go from there. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, they provide a lot of insight into human history. It's easier to connect to when visiting in person rather than looking it up online, which is not always reliable in most cases. And you can't really connect to an image of an artifact. It's just research.
Right.
Well, just, like, to touch on that, like, kind of back to that tangible and intangible, like, typically museums, I hope, have access to, like, history books of, like, real typical accounts. I know, like, Waitewood, we have our Waitewood books that have real accounts from people that lived in Waitewood.
Right.
And, like, to get that information, you know that it's real because it came from the people that lived it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were going to get that, again, off the internet, that's so vast and wide. Everyone has access to the internet. You can edit it. It's full of facts and opinions that, well, facts and opinions mean nothing to when it comes on the internet. But when it's in a real book that was made,
Mhm.
particularly in that time, it's a lot more reliable when you're
Right.
wanting that information. So to come into the museum, and even like I know in the book the other day I was reading, it was talking about a specific object, and we have that object in the museum, and it's just like, oh, that's what they were talking about.
Right.
So just those kind of pieces that it's just like, this is wild that this is still here, and without the museum, where would this have been?
Right. And I think it's just as important for the museum. I know, like, we often think about collecting the tangible, and we often neglect the intangible.
Mm-hmm.
But as we were saying, they need to go together, and they need to work together. And our history book was, published in 1992, I believe?
I don't have it, but I think so.
References throughout say 1990.
Yeah. So, I mean, since 1992, I don't know if our museum has really collected a lot of those stories, which is why we are collecting stories and trying to publish 100 stories of Whitewood. So if you have a story, definitely reach out to us and get in touch, and we can talk about how you can put your story in that book. Had to do a little shameless plug.
It's fine.
While you're at it, you can tell them to come tell me where all the buildings were and Whitewood to help us make our map.
Right, Taydeen started this project about... Sorry. Do you want to tell them a little bit more about it?
We are planning on making a map of Whitewood throughout history for as far back as we can of all the buildings, a street map, and hopefully get one of each and every year throughout. It's a long project.
It'll be a 2-year project.
Yeah.
And we only work for 2 months. So
AKA subscribe so that we have jobs next summer here.
They're going to be so sick and tired of us plugging all these things throughout these podcasts.
You know, it's the time of the internet now. You gotta plug, or you don't get anywhere. Also, follow our Instagram and Facebook.
But I mean, while we're talking about these are all things that we as a museum are working on.
Yeah.
But there's also so much more. We have programming.
Oh, yeah.
That's going on, right? It's not, these programs aren't bound to the museum walls. No. Do you want to talk a little bit about our programs, you guys?
So, we planned a couple things. So, we have a murder mystery coming up. If you see this in time and the event hasn't happened, please RSVP. Thanks. Love ya. We also do Kid Hour and Teen Takeover Hour, where kids can come in Mondays and Wednesdays, or teens are Mondays and kids are on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock, and we do different events. We do Army boot camps, we do crafts, we do escape rooms. We're going to do a little bit of a storytelling and just kind of sharing the knowledge with the kids. And good old Catherine here is the pro scavenger hunt maker. Oh. And so I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, we're starting scavenger hunts. They reset every Monday afternoon and they close on Saturdays. And honestly, it has been the coolest thing because it's literally the kids are learning while they're doing it. And it's really funny because it's practically school and they don't realize it. Like we did for Victoria Day and Canada Day, they had to go find these facts about each and learn more about it. Like University of Victoria has a Science of Batman course.
Yep.
Like that's crazy. And then I've done 2 where they're like puzzle pieces, so I get maps. One of Saskatchewan, one of Canada, and I cut it up and hide the pieces around, and then they have to construct the map. A lot of these kids should learn a little bit more about maps in school. Sign up for the teacher.
I teach grade 5. That's not a part of it. You talk to the grade 6 teacher.
Okay, I'll talk to the grade 6 teacher. But yeah, but it's great. It's a great experience for them to just, it's a fun way for them to learn. Yeah. And that's what I love about it. And we've got 7 kids every week, coming back pretty much. So it's awesome, and I love that program. What else do we have going on this summer? We have a lot of events planned.
We do a lot of movie nights.
Yeah.
We have a night at the museum. Come join, hang out with us. Yeah. Later this week, we have kite making, which hopefully that goes really well. I'm really excited about it. I really kind of want to make a kite, so hopefully that they let me.
Yeah.
We are going to have a show and tell come up. The tea,
yeah. You can go off on the tea.
So, there was some ladies in Whitewood Gene and Jesse Blackwood. I think that's the
Yep,
names.
yep.
They where our Heritage Museum is actually, I believe, used to be their dress shop, wasn't it?
I can't. I don't know. Ask Tadine. Tadine read about it.
Hold up. I got my notebook here
feel
somewhere.
like it
Hold on, while she's looking, I'll tell you the story. So we are having a tea that is essentially hosted by them, where patrons of Whitewood can come and dress up in their fancy attire, and we're gonna have their hats there,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be a big fancy tea that's really nice, and just live in history essentially. So I'll tell you a little bit about it just in case you want to show up. So you can dress up fancy. If you're not really into dressing into the posh wear, you can wear black and white. And it's just kind of set in that year, the year Tadine.
I was just gonna say.
Approximately 1900 to 1920, Mrs. Jean and Jesse Janet Blackwood had a millinery and dressmaking shop in the old Monroe building, which
Don't quote me on that.
That bank's moved around a lot also.
Everything's moved around a lot.
Yeah. When you look at the Whitewood photos and the evolution of like where things like jumped, like I found out, Tate told me the other day that there was a candy store in the thrift store, and I'm like, what?
Well, that was recent.
Yeah, I know, but she didn't know.
Well, I'm new to Whitewood,
Right.
Like,
Yeah. No, it's that building has changed what it was so many times.
Yeah.
I love both. I love candy and I love clothes. So anyway, we should get back on topic of museums.
Yes. Yeah. So let's talk about because museums hold history, right?
Yeah.
So why is history important?
So I think, for me, preserving raw history is a really hard job to do, and that's something that museums oversee pretty much. And, I think preserving history, just again, because the internet, there's so many, facts and opinions that really are not fact. So it's, museums' job to, filter what's real or what's not.
Yeah.
And so with that, museums preserving that raw history, it's kind of keeping that history alive, so to speak. And without museums, to keep that history, we're relying on the internet, which is growing and changing. I found out we had 2 train stations in Whitewood. Everyone only thought we had one. The other day we found out that there was 2.
Yeah. And that's the thing that's really crazy. It was really funny, actually. So, for those of you who do not know, our museum's run by a volunteer committee. And we have a local historian who has recently stepped off due to health reasons, but they were coming in, and we had one committee member who's, born and raised in Whitewood, and this historian, and they were going at it because they were arguing about the train stations. And when one of the committee members and I were looking into it, we were looking at pictures of our train station, and we found 2 where they don't look alike at all. And we're we're so confused. Well, we realized that everyone was right, but we were just confused about which train station was which because we had 2. So the first one was taken down, I believe, in 1929. And if my memory is not right, that's okay, because we have a YouTube video detailing all of this, so you'll have to go check that out and fact check me on that. But yeah, and then the other one, the second one, was moved in 1972, and that one, actually, the lower part of that building is now our current day pool house, which is kind of cool. So there's a lot of interesting things, in our display of the CPR, we don't even have the second train station that everyone remembers in town up on our wall, which we're working on fixing that. Yeah. But that's I would have never known unless there was that debate and we looked closer into it.
I don't know about you guys, but I learned from the past of even we don't want to talk about it. I don't want to breathe this into existence, but during the pandemic, even researchers, they took back research from future pandemics, and that's what helped them get the, I don't know, what's the word, cure? Or not cure, but the vaccine so quickly, because they're okay, this is what we did here, and they adjusted it to meet the coronavirus. So if we wouldn't have had that information about those past pandemics, we'd probably still be in that pandemic, probably.
Right. Anything to add on that?
Well, not so much on the COVID thing. She's got that
okay.
correct, down to a T. Yeah, really, they help us learn from past events, wonders, and tragedies. We see a collective heritage celebrated throughout the museums a lot. That's
Yeah.
really cool to see. You see the community, which kind of who settled in
Right.
our area, the
Mm-hmm.
cultures and whatnot. That's really cool.
Yeah, and touching on that, like our museum, all our artifacts are donated.
Yes.
So they're donated by the community members. These are their cultural and heritage artifacts that they are giving us. We have a really good Newfoundland display,
Yeah.
and that's the Newfoundland colony that's just up north. And I mean, we wouldn't have that if those people weren't so generous in their donations to the museum or lending us their artifacts, their cultural ones, and so that's why we have a really good Newfoundland display.
When like everything in this museum has a story, in any museum. Like again about your like typewriter, like there's a story behind it, which I'm sure you want to get on a tangent about it again. But like it's from someone or someplace or from a point in time, and it holds memory, whether it's like a family heirloom from a business or just even something random from that time. And like when we think about specifically family heirlooms, usually the person tells you the story behind it. Like I know, like when I have my grandpa's watch, like, and I hold on to that, and I remember my grandpa used to wear this every day,
Right.
before he passed, or like my mom's rings that I wear, those pass them on. Like they all have memories attached to them, and so when they're in the museum, they're perfectly preserved. Like yeah, it's sad that they're not being passed down anymore, but there's this story behind it, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get into. Like anything you look at in a museum, you pick up, look at, touch, whether it's in a book, it has a memory or a story attached to it, and I think we have to remember that it's not just like, oh, this is a pin from 19 whatever.
Right.
It has a story. It belonged to someone, and it like brings the question like, who did this belong to? When did they wear it? Why did they get it? How much did it cost? Like it's all those questions that are going through your head when you're looking at something, and that information is all within that building.
Yeah. And I think it is sad that they're not getting passed down anymore, but I think in another aspect, in a little bit more positive light in a sense, is because families start getting so big, right? Family trees get large. Everyone in the family can enjoy, if you had donated your grandfather's watch or whatever, everyone in your family could, not telling you to do that.
Not gonna happen.
And it's not gonna happen here either, because, but that's just something of like, everyone from the family eventually can enjoy that.
Yeah.
And also other people who aren't part of your family can enjoy, like we have a baby blanket here from a family.
Yeah, like it had been, all the siblings had been wrapped in that blanket.
Yeah. And like that could have been passed down.
Yeah.
But I'm going to assume maybe the family, like, what do you do with, like, some things, what do you do with?
Well, like with one, if both kids have kids, who do you give the blanket to?
Who do you give it to, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just easier to donate it to the museum so they can all enjoy it.
Yeah.
Plus you can have other people come in
Yeah.
and enjoy it too. So that's another cool thing about museums. Like, I went to a museum in Owen Sound, I believe. Yeah, it's in Ontario. And they have, like, my great, I don't know how many greats, but grandfather's sword that he used in, like, the Fenian raids. Like, and that was just cool to see.
Yeah.
But, like, what would I do with a sword?
Yeah.
But now anyone can see the sword, but also my family was able to go and see it. So that's kind of a cool and neat thing. And I mean, the history of it doesn't have anything to do with Saskatchewan because they lived in Ontario.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no. Any thoughts, Tadine?
Well, you visited the one in Ontario. I went up to Valemount, BC, and checked out a small museum there because it was local, like ours. It celebrates the local culture and the local history instead of just going online and finding the overall history of something. You get to see the local stuff. Like, they had the Japanese intermittent camps. I don't know if you know much about that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, they had the Japanese intermittent camps. They told us what the army and military was doing up there, kind of their secret operations and whatnot, which I won't get too much into because I can't remember the exact details. But they had all of that. They had a really cool train going all throughout the building that someone made out of paper mache. Like, that was
cool.
a huge, whoever did that, shout out to you because that was awesome.
Yeah.
They got old train engines up there, and it was really cool to learn about the local history of someplace different.
Yeah.
Just going through as a tourist.
Yeah, that's a good point of like, because it was a small museum, right?
Yeah.
Small community museum. Like, small community museums, like, people often overlook them. They go to the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
But, guys, we have so much to offer, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and maybe I shouldn't admit this on the air. All the big museums are going to come for us. But, like, we don't quite have the rules that the big museums have because we can't enforce them like they can.
Yeah. Don't steal from us, though. We'll try.
But I mean, like, if the people want to touch the bricks and the frog,
Yeah.
like, we're not gonna be like, as long as they're not throwing the bricks,
Yeah.
we really don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have more fragile things in display cases.
Yes.
I mean, like,
That we label do not
Yes,
touch.
yeah.
But there's things that you can, like, lift up and
Right.
see things. And, like, we label those pretty well. Like,
Yeah.
you can look in here.
yeah. So yeah, I think that's just like something that's really cool about small town museums. Anything
Well,
else? to add?
sometimes you don't even know that they have a museum. Like, I know
Right.
we're kind of out of the way.
Mhm.
That people come in and they're like, we didn't even know you were here.
Right.
And they, like, once they walk through our museum, which, by the way, is 3 buildings, so come see us, they're like, this is, like, one of the best museums I've walked through. Like, they're
Mhm.
like, this is, like, actually interesting. And they,
Yeah.
well, the man and son the other day, they're like,
Yeah.
this is one of the most laid out museums. It's interesting to look at. Like,
Mhm.
every display you want to look at to see.
Yeah, there's a lot more cool museums in the area. Like I know Broadview Museum.
Yeah.
They have Percival's old post office, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly. Like, that's heritage. Like, my dad relates to that because he used to live in Percival. Like, yeah, I feel like you've got something you really want to jump
I really
in.
want to mention Sergeant Billy, who fought at Vimy Ridge, the goat. We must talk about the goat just a little bit.
Here's us not plugging our own museum anymore.
Yeah, you know, come stop by and see Whitewood and Broadview. They got a goat that fought at Vimy Ridge.
Yeah, and we're working on a passport program. So, like,
Oh,
if
yeah.
you go to all, like, they're along the number 1 from Indian Head to Mooseman, if you stop at all our museums, there's a little prize. Anyways, do you want to plug Billy a little bit more? You're good.
So, essentially, there's this goat locally from our area because they took the train through all the soldiers and whatnot, and this little girl had this goat. And they wanted a mascot, so they asked her if they could take it and promise to return it alive. And it did get returned alive. But the
Okay.
goat went off, and they shipped him across the seas, and he traveled around with them. He got promoted to sergeant, and then he got his promotion taken away from offending the higher-ups, the officers, like bunting him and eating the roll call papers.
I was going to say.
And he had a certain, yeah. And there's recounts of him saving the soldiers because he could hear the shells coming when they couldn't and knocking them into the trenches. And, yeah. He
Love
came
that.
back to Broadview and lived there until he died, and then they had him stuffed, and he now resides there.
You gotta go see Billy the Goat.
As I said, I've never heard this story before, and I was listening, and I physically thought she was talking about a person, and then I realized she was talking about a goat.
Billy the Goat. Not, oh, you know what's so funny is my parents asked me, like, they had, like, this, Jennifer Jones, like, during the curling season, they said that she's, like, the goat of curling.
Yeah.
And they thought they were calling her the goat because she's, like, been there for a long time in the curling scene. They're like, so they're calling her old? And I was like, no, it means greatest of all time. But yeah, gotta clarify now with that.
So it's not actually a goat.
Billy?
Yeah.
Billy's
Billy
an
is a
actual
goat.
goat. He
Yeah.
actually was at Vimy
He's-
Ridge when
He's the goat. Like, he's the greatest of all time goat.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a road trip to see the goat?
You gotta go. You have to go to Broadview on your day off. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like,
Is someone going to come with me in case
I'll come with you. I haven't been yet. I just did research for a 4-H speech.
I have been. I have seen Billy the Goat. Yeah.
Is it going to make me sad, though?
Why?
Because it's, like, actually his skin. It's just now he's stuffed.
Well,
Does the elk creep you out?
Yeah.
Oh.
We have an elk in our museum that gives me the eyes every time I shut off the lights in that one room, and it really creeps me out.
Okay, but it's not as creepy as the mannequin
True.
in the military room.
Ah, yes,
True.
Charles.
She says it reminds her of Dame Charles.
See, one thing about our museum, we have a lot of mannequins in our... Well, we have the dead elk, obviously.
That's one way of putting it.
We have a lot of mannequins. So we should actually probably, like, host, like, an after-hours museum with, like, the lights off. like a ghost hunting day or something, because we also have a ghost. Me and Tadine figured
Yes,
out.
and Dayton was telling us stories. He's a previous worker. He's telling us stories about music or the record players randomly playing.
Oh.
The one, you know, the one that doesn't work.
Which one? In the other room?
Yeah.
Or this one?
And not in this room, in the schoolhouse.
Oh, in the
There's a
schoolhouse
big box one.
No, it works.
Oh, anyways, he's saying he's just walking through there one day and it started playing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, we have mannequins that when you turn off the lights, it's very creepy. And so the other day I went to go shut up because no one was here.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, I'm like, save power, save the planet. Super cute. So I went and turned the lights off in the schoolhouse. And then I walked through to shut the back door. And then I turned around and I saw a figure and it was the mannequin, but I nearly jumped out of my pants. Because I was like, because Tadine was in the other room and I was shutting off the lights and I'm like, Tay? And there was no response, and I walked closer, and it's a mannequin. I'm like, ah!
Which mannequin?
The one in the military.
He gets me every time too. It always, yeah, that.
But yeah, I got scared out of my pants the other day. So. Yeah.
No, it's definitely been interesting working here, because we have great stories like those.
Yeah.
But also, like, I mean, I grew up in Whitewood. I didn't know we had a train station, let alone, like, two.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Because you also grew up here.
Yeah, and I'm not big in town because I'm rural, so
Right.
I don't know a lot of it. So it's really interesting to be working on the project I'm now and see
Yeah.
everything that there was and was located.
Yeah.
And kind of like we had a bunch of old counts and stuff from
Right.
like England come over, and they built really cool houses, and it was like a big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of that. I didn't know too much about. I knew we have the Finnish colony because I live
Right.
up there, like in that area. And
Right.
know the church. I've been
Mhm.
there when I was younger, and that's cool. I didn't know much more about like obviously we knew about the indigenous
Right.
like in our area because we have a lot of that, especially at the school.
Mhm.
But now I didn't know we had a Hungarian or like Scottish and stuff kind of
Right.
communities. So
Yeah.
that's really cool to see.
They used to say that you had to know 11 different languages to do business in Whitewood, which is crazy. And that's also what our flag gardens represents, is each flag is from, represents a country where people had come over and they've colonized or have different colonies, like the Finnish Newfoundland one. So that's definitely really cool. And we do have history on surrounding area too, like the rural communities.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's cool. And Brooklyn, I want to get your opinion. Being someone who didn't grow up here, what's the coolest thing about learning about the history of Whitewood?
So, like, again, like, when Tay was saying, like, the cultures that were here, like, I grew up on a farm outside Regina and then moved into Regina. So I know, like, the history of, like, Regina from my grandpa. We should get him on to talk about that. And, like, my grandma, she lived in Indian Head most of her life. And then my grandma taught in Rocanville, which is not too far from here. So, I knew bits and pieces, but I didn't really know any of the history. So, like, moving here, like, again, learning about the different cultures that are here in Whitewood, like, how Whitewood developed. Like, it's cool for me because it's so different than Regina.
Right.
Like, even when we talk about, like, our, like, even though we're the youngins, we grew up, like, our school experience and our, the way we grew up was so different, but we grew up around the same times.
Right.
And it's just, like, I lived in a bigger city and you grew up in a small town, but it was just so different.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think it would be because we're not that far.
Right. And for reference,
Yeah.
like, we're 2 years apart.
Yeah.
Brooklyn and myself.
I have cousins that go to city schools in like Alberta, so it's quite a ways away, and we get talking a lot, and it's really cool because. So I remember when we were younger, we were talking about it, and they get like better science classes because they got more stuff available. But their history is not as in depth; it's more like filtered through like school stuff. We get really good history classes. Yeah. But,
I was gonna say, when we talk about stuff, I'm like, you learn that? And I'm like, ooh. It's crazy to think the things that we learn differently. And it wasn't because, like, one's right or wrong. It's just, you're in a small town. Like, a lot of the community here is, like, farming and, like, agriculture. And, like, in Regina, that's big, too, in, like, the outside areas. But in Regina, it's just, like, businesses and the economy and, like, taxes. Taxes! We
lot of the agricultural stuff around here. Like, we got 4-H display here,
Yeah.
which is I didn't know about, and I've been trying to get the 4-H club to come and see it, but
Yeah.
because we got a big 4-H around here. Like, Whitewood hosts our regional show and sale, which is a pretty big deal.
We have Girl Guides in Whitewood. We saw the girl. We just yesterday we found out about the Girl Guides display. Well, she showed me. I'm like, that's been there the whole time. Also, I was like, there's Girl Guides in Whitewood.
Not anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, so it used to be called Brownies, which is the Girl Guides. But like my cousins, who are 20 years older than me, they participated in it. But there was never anything when I grew up. So somewhere in that 20 years, they stopped.
I was gonna say, it's still going in Regina.
Yeah.
But it's not like they don't go to door to door anymore. They just like hold up at a Walmart or like a
Right.
farmer's market and they sell cookies.
Well, that's probably their best.
Yeah, it's probably a lot safer.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Definitely there's a lot of things like there's a lot of organizations that are still around, just not in Whitewood. Like the Elks recently folded. The Eastern Star, we had someone here saying about how like it's still going on, but here in Whitewood it's been gone for like quite a while, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything about it, but
No, you were taking notes and they were talking.
yeah, I was taking notes. I was like, I don't know anything about this organization. So if anyone asks me in the future, I got notes.
Yeah, and on the Elks thing, if anyone knows the medals or those things, we need to find out what that one is.
One, we can't read it. It's like a book and it has a writing across
Yeah,
it.
it's got 2 words on it.
But
Tay
we
had
can't-
me looking at the other day, and like I can make out most of the letters. So like maybe we could do some like Wordle stuff today, trying to a Wordle game with the podcast, trying to figure out what the book says.
Maybe next episode, that's what it'll be.
Yeah,
Yeah. But yeah.
game day Wordle.
Yeah. No.
Need a word of the day.
Word of the day.
Yeah.
Okay, let's end the podcast off with a word of the day. What would your word of the day be, Tay?
There's a lot of words. Yes, I guess archives.
Archives. Ooh.
We have a committee member that loves to talk about archives, which leads into our first guest next week.
I told her over the phone so she couldn't touch it. Not that she would. She's not harmful. That's okay. We're not abused. We have the best bosses.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. Yeah, we gotta.
You'll find more about her next week, so you have to tune in.
You'll have
if
to
you
tune in
wanna...
to find out who it is.
Yeah, it's gonna be super fun and fresh. And as you guys know, we're humorous over here, so you know it'll be a fun time.
It'll be awesome. Yeah, and because that's just briefly going into that. We have the museum here. We have the Heritage Center on Main Street. And then in the back, we actually have our archives, and that's where we really protect the primary documents that we have and pictures. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that next week.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for joining us. We had a lot of fun discussing about museums, and yeah, definitely hope that we get the conversation going and discussion going about museums and why they're important and why it's important to talk about history. But yeah.
Remember to keep listening if you want to listen to Our Town.
Yes, tune in next time.
Bye.
Bye.